My mother perished during childbirth, and my aunt, disregarding all opposition, wed my father as his second wife. Subsequently, my aunt conceived and urged me to marry into a humble family. I refused, weeping as I implored my father to consent to the marriage proposal from the loyal duke's family. I would rather wed a paralyzed, fated nobleman than share a humble existence with a scholar from a lowly background. The entire city whispered behind my back, casting disparaging remarks. My father's heart grew cold, while my aunt, with tear-streaked cheeks, feared for my well-being. Bah! Spare me your pretenses. I can hear your sordid thoughts all too clearly. 01 For over half a month, I languished upon my sickbed, while my aunt urged me persistently during that time. She wished to wed me to my uncle's distant cousin, Song Ruching. The Song family, consisting of a widowed mother and her orphan son, had relied on my aunt's assistance for many years. Initially, they were beneath my aunt's notice. But upon hearing of Song Ruching's recent success in the imperial examination, she suddenly extolled his elegance and remarkable demeanor. My inquiries have revealed that although the Song family is in decline, Song Ruching is diligent in his studies and surely has a promising future ahead. The implication was clear: impoverished now, yet with potential for prosperity. My previously suppressed cough returned with a vengeance, and Fulling, who had been watching over me for quite some time, hastily approached to rub my back. The medicinal concoction she held had long since cooled, yet my aunt feigned ignorance. Your mother passed away early. If not for my deep concern for you, why would I wade through the murky waters of this household? I could not suppress a sigh of despair, feeling a surge of resentment. My mother died in childbirth, and the world spoke of the profound sisterly bond among the Shin sisters, yet my aunt disregarded all objections to become my father's second wife. She was in the bloom of her youth at that time, while my father was over a decade her senior. The maid accompanying the dowry whispered gently in my ear, "If it weren't for you, your aunt could easily secure a better match." In my youth, I was easily swayed by such tactics, often defending my aunt's interests. I drove away my father's favored concubine, incurring the wrath of my grandmother, who had previously favored me. Even before reaching adulthood, I had already earned a reputation for being willful and arrogant. Now, my formerly doting aunt, with countless advantageous matches in the capital, was singularly focused on persuading me to marry into a destitute family. Leaning against the bed, I squinted at her slightly protruding belly. The fetus was barely 3 months along, yet she was already eagerly planning for its future. Whether Song Ruching was a good match or not mattered little. The distant Song family was precisely what my aunt desired. Moreover, my uncle was utterly compliant to her wishes, able to manipulate the Song family as easily as one crushes an ant. After all, she had been administering potent concoctions to me for quite some time, and since I had not perished, she believed that once I entered the Song household, even a mysterious death would not implicate her. I had initially thought my aunt genuinely cared for me until that fateful day when, after a bout of coughing that left me dizzy, I began to hear the thoughts of those around me. My aunt stated that she did not wish for me to be entangled in the affairs of the highborn. The Song family, being few in number and lacking in scheming, was deemed a suitable match for my straightforward nature. Yet, I could distinctly hear her true sentiments. If this sickly creature were to perish on the journey, it would be for the best. If only the poisons had been stronger, both mother and daughter would have perished, leaving behind only a troublesome remnant. I realized then that my mother had died unjustly, but my aunt's sudden wariness towards me stemmed from something far more sinister. A few months prior, my aunt had not visited Kueishui for quite some time, and after lying ill for several days, I grew worried and hurriedly pushed open the door, only to find a young man hastily rising from behind the bed curtains. My aunt claimed he was a physician summoned for her ailment. If he were indeed a healer, why the need for such furtive haste? At that moment I thought little of it. Perhaps from that day forth, my aunt had plotted my demise. Thus, when my father came to inquire about my health one day, I conceived a plan. He returned from the main hall in a dour mood, sitting at my bedside, lost in thought. He pondered why the emperor had suddenly proposed a marriage for the ailing Duke of Zhongwu that morning in court. On the surface, it appears to relieve the emperor's concerns, yet who can truly fathom the depths of such matters? My father's thoughts began to stir, and he had contemplated my fate several times. The Song family may lack status, yet Song Ruching possesses some talent. Wanting would surely find it intolerable to suffer indignities. However, if I could align with the emperor's wishes, it would indeed be a match with the Duke of Zhongwu. He, a mere military man, could hardly grasp the intricacies of such relationships. He merely sought to find the most advantageous outcome. My mind churned with possibilities. Yet I quickly realized that this might be my chance to secure a peaceful future. No matter how far-reaching my aunt's influence, she could not reach into the Duke's household to claim my life. Furthermore, with the title of the Duke's wife, I would surely find a way to avenge my mother's grievances. After half an hour had passed, my father had neglected to inquire about the improvement of my condition. Seeing me gradually succumb to slumber, he sighed and exited with a frown. I immediately opened my eyes, summoned Thwarting, and whispered a few words in her ear. She nodded repeatedly, though hesitantly. "Miss, does this truly mean you need not marry into the Song family? I have heard from those in the outer courtyard that the mistress has already begun preparing your dowry." I urged her to proceed without worry. At this moment, it seemed our only escape. Before long, news spread throughout the capital that the benevolent emperor intended to arrange a marriage for the paralyzed Duke of Zhongwu. Instantly, the noble ladies of high birth recoiled in horror, fearing association with such a fate. As the opportunity matured, I consumed 2 bowls of bird's nest soup, invigorated, and hurried to my father's study before he returned from court. Upon entering, I immediately knelt, and the incense had blurred my vision, causing tears to stream down my cheeks. "I implore you, father, to petition the emperor on my behalf for the Duke of Zhongwu's hand in marriage. If you refuse, I shall remain kneeling here." My father, a seasoned warrior who had fought on horseback for decades, was incensed and overturned his teacup in frustration. "As an unmarried daughter, how dare you meddle in matters of marriage?" His face flushed crimson, yet he was unaware that I had overheard his innermost thoughts. He is troubled about how to broach the subject, yet now he has the perfect excuse to say, "I am desperate for marriage," while outside. They might claim that the old man seeks to curry favor with the emperor by pushing his daughter into a perilous situation. He made a grand display of punishing me, forcing me to kneel at the ancestral hall and copy the teachings for daughters. Yet, he also sent word to spread the news of my request to marry the Duke of Zhongwu. My aunt, ever vigilant, had long ensured that my desire to marry into the Song family was common knowledge, yet now her plans were thwarted. Little did she understand the machinations of my father's mind. At that time, the Song family had sought a matchmaker, but my father evaded their advances, leaving my aunt helpless and bewildered. Day by day, I focused on nurturing my health, watching the unfolding drama, and finally awaited the emperor's decree for marriage. Yet, it became the greatest joke in the capital. Whispers circulated that the Duke was partially paralyzed and incapable of consummating a marriage, leading to a life of widowhood. This fact pleased me immensely. I would not be ensnared in the rivalries of wives and concubines, and would have a husband who was restrained. In my future role as the mistress of the Duke's household, I had no need to fear my aunt. It was time for her to fear me instead. 03. On the day of my wedding, my aunt wept inconsolably. She clung to me, unwilling to let go, fearing I would face countless difficulties upon entering the Duke's residence. I played along, shedding a few tears of my own, yet her loud lamentations nearly provoked laughter from me. Though the Duke's household may not be what it once was, it is still an elevation in status. This girl has truly secured a fortunate escape. Once I have settled in the Duke's residence, it will not be easy for her to reclaim her influence over me. May the Duke not be one to trifle with. She hoped I would encounter a wicked mother-in-law, perhaps leading to my untimely demise. The aged Duke of Zhongwu had once been a companion to the Empress Dowager, and the rules of the household were notoriously stringent. The young Duke, He Chongyue, had been stricken by a mysterious illness years ago, leaving him bedridden, and he would have been the favored son had he not suffered such a fate. Once a figure of ethereal grace, he had now fallen from grace, having surpassed the age for betrothal. Those who had once eagerly sought to align with the Duke's family had gradually distanced themselves after his affliction. Despite the nearly diminished status of the Duke's household, my aunt's envy burned bright. Yet, as I stepped into the carriage, her thoughts revealed a flicker of delight. What if the legitimate daughter, the principal wife? She is no different from me, being carried away in a sedan. The principal wife is traditionally welcomed on horseback, while only the illegitimate daughters are born in a carriage. The Duke had no brothers. Thus, he could not come, and I could only take the carriage. My father, feeling humiliated, turned away before the sedan was even lifted. What a disgrace. This daughter has brought shame upon our family. I concealed all my emotions beneath the red veil, my fingers clenching the handkerchief tightly. Regardless of what lay ahead, I had severed all ties with the General's household in my heart. Memories of my mother filled me with an indifference towards the affairs of that household. The residence of the loyal and martial Marquis was adorned with splendid decorations, yet I found it impossible to smile. with my bridal veil still unlifted. I sat stiffly at the edge of the bed. Behind me lay the motionless figure of Hee Chong-yue. The murmurs of a handful of servant girls within the room had escalated into a grand spectacle, far more boisterous than the performances outside on the stage. What general's legitimate daughter? She merely seeks wealth and status, preferring to remain in the Marquis's house with this paralytic rather than accept the role of a poor scholar's primary wife. I have long sensed she possesses no gentle disposition. I wonder how she will assert herself within the estate in the future. The outsiders are laughing. They say she wept and pleaded to marry the Marquis. What kind of shameless young lady is this? Could it be she believes that with the Marquis incapacitated and the old lady advanced in years, she will effortlessly assume the role of the matriarch? Just wait and see. The old lady will not look kindly upon someone so opportunistic. I listened with keen interest, eagerly awaiting the moment the veil would be lifted, ready to match voices to faces. Yet, suddenly, a chill ran through me. Why did I not hear Hee Chong-yue's voice? It was true he was paralyzed, but I had heard no mention of him being mute, let alone devoid of any inner thoughts, unless he were a living corpse. As I pondered this, a clear male voice resonated from behind me. I find myself in quite a predicament. You may lift the veil and help yourself to something to eat. Upon lifting the veil and turning to face him, I was met by Hee Chong-yue's probing gaze. My heart skipped a beat. Never had anyone mentioned how extraordinarily handsome this young Marquis was, devoid of any hint of the fierce warrior he was reputed to be. His raven-black hair cascaded around him. His arched brows and starry eyes, a straight nose and thin lips, would leave an indelible impression upon anyone who chanced to glance back. He averted his gaze, his voice cool and detached. How long does the lady intend to stare at me? I could only awkwardly divert my eyes, yet I could not suppress my curiosity. Why is it that I cannot hear Hee Chong-yue's thoughts? On the night of our wedding, I was drenched in perspiration. Hee Chong-yue dismissed all the maids from the room, including my accompanying maids, Fuling and Xiaotao. All customary rituals, such as the exchanging of cups of wine, were entirely omitted, leaving only a pair of red candles burning quietly. We regarded each other in silence, momentarily at a loss for what to do. He cleared his throat. My lady, you may need to assist me in moving, otherwise, it appears you shall have to sleep on the floor. Clad in heavy bridal attire, adorned with elaborate hairpins, I grit my teeth and mustered the fortitude to push him. My inner garment was already dampened, and I had only managed to nudge him a few inches. He raised his hand, adjusting the blanket for himself, which incensed me further. Had he indicated that he was not completely paralyzed, I would not have been so exhausted. From the corner of my eye, I caught a hint of a smile at the corner of his lips, though his expression remained icy. In a fit of pique, I rolled over, lying on my side fully clothed, resolutely refusing to acknowledge him any further. In the depths of night, I awoke in a haze, feeling a thick blanket draped over me, an arm resting across my body. Fuling roused me early the next morning, and I found Hee Chong-yue gazing at me with clear, bright eyes. My mother detests tardiness. I fear you may not have time to prepare yourself. I gritted my teeth, sensing his deliberate provocation. My hair from the previous night remained unbound, a chaotic mess. I had no choice but to let Fuling dampen my hair, hastily preparing to pay my respects to my mother-in-law. As my aunt had anticipated, I was met with a display of authority. The matriarch, who most abhorred lateness, made me stand outside for a full hour. A maid came to relay the message, her face filled with derision. The old lady has awakened. She requests that the lady wait a while longer. Fuling grew anxious, fearing I might catch a chill so soon after my illness. I swiftly stopped her. This was not the general's estate, and should she offend anyone, I could not guarantee her safety. Having just emerged from the dragon's den, I needed to assess this tiger's lair before making any plans. At first glance, I discerned that my mother-in-law held no affection for me. Though her words were polite, her heart was rife with criticism. She likely viewed my eagerness to marry as mercenary, coveting the prestige of the Marquis. On the very first day, she presented me with 2 challenges. The first was to ensure the continuation of the Marquis by adopting a child at the earliest opportunity. The second, due to her advanced age, was to entrust household management to me, with 2 matrons assigned to guide me. However, I quickly discerned her true intentions. These seemingly difficult tasks were, in fact, quite manageable. I served tea and approached her to knead her shoulders. Initially, she stiffened, but gradually, she relaxed. The 2 matters you mentioned are undoubtedly pressing, but the first cannot be rushed. Not to mention that a newlywed daughter-in-law should not be in such haste to find an heir. Others might think I fear for my position as the matriarch. Furthermore, the Marquis has been unwell for several years. I have heard that the imperial physician has not declared him beyond recovery. Why must we rush regarding matters of succession? It would be wiser to wait a year or so before making further plans. My mother-in-law's resolve softened somewhat, and she conceded to my suggestion. I could not help but feel a twinge of pity for He. What difference was there between him and me? His own mother did not advocate for him. And now, with the fear of him suddenly passing, the Marquis could fall to ruin. The pretense of finding an heir was nothing more than a way to create a puppet for herself. As for the second matter, having two matrons to guide me is something I would gladly welcome. However, it is most unwise to relay messages twice. It would be better for me to consult you directly whenever necessary. What a farce, finding two matrons to serve as spies. Passing along messages while simultaneously providing my mother-in-law with an escape route. Should I find myself in a dispute later, she could simply claim that the two matrons had miscommunicated. In this household, I had already witnessed enough of such intrigues during my time at the general's estate. Upon my return to the inner courtyard, I learned that He had already been informed of these developments. I braced myself for yet another storm, yet he seemed utterly unfazed, leisurely sipping tea, even inquiring, "Did your mother bestow upon you any heirloom jewelry?" My hands were empty, yet he produced a translucent jade bracelet from his clothing and placed it upon my wrist. "This was left by my mother. It does not count as an heirloom, as you are only the second generation." I looked at him with some astonishment. "Do you not wish to know why I insisted on marrying you?" He chuckled heartily. "Why should I inquire? Regardless of the reason, you are now my lawfully wedded wife. Voluntarily choosing to endure this situation, what need is there for questions?" This elusive young Marquis, from whom I could not hear any thoughts, was indeed difficult to fathom. He explained that the old lady of the Marquis was not his biological mother. She had adopted him after failing to bear children of her own. I had heard of the late Marquis's legendary exploits on the battlefield, single-handedly facing 100 foes, perishing in the northern frontiers. Yet, matters of concubines within the inner chambers were private affairs, unknown to outsiders. Thus, you need only maintain a facade. There is no need to burden yourself with the expectation of being a dutiful daughter-in-law. At once, I grasped his underlying message. I had indeed entered a den of tigers. Was he suggesting I disregard the old lady and seize power? Just as I was contemplating this, a slight noise from outside drew my attention, and I promptly rose. Outside stood Chiotao. "My lady, someone from the general's estate inquired whether, on the day of your return, you and the Marquis require someone to escort you." I scoffed. "For my return, I shall naturally ride in the Marquisite's carriage. There is no need to trouble my aunt to send someone to fetch us. When I married, I had only brought Fulling with me, who had accompanied me since childhood. It was reasonable for her to serve as my maid. Yet, my aunt insisted on sending Chiotao, claiming she wished to spare me additional care, but her intentions were far more ulterior. Did she truly believe I had not overheard her scheming that day? Even if he is a paralytic, having a beauty by his side, does she really think the Marquis would not take a concubine? Her decision to send Chiotao was laden with ulterior motives, seeking to ascertain whether the Marquis was truly incapable of consummation. In a grand estate without an heir, I shall see how she can maintain her position as the matriarch. On the day of my return, He was carried onto the carriage by the steward. The Marquisite's carriage was custom-made, extending over 3 meters, allowing him to lie comfortably. However, as it traversed the streets, it attracted considerable attention and speculation. The carriage of the Marquis's residence, indeed, resembles a grand coffin, I mused, seated within, while He beside me closed his eyes in meditative silence, seemingly indifferent to my thoughts. Upon our arrival at the general's estate, my aunt and father had been awaiting us outside for quite some time. As the attendants carried the Marquis inside, I couldn't help but notice the deepening gloom in my father's gaze. What a sin it is to seek such a son-in-law. My aunt, however, wore a troubled expression on the surface, while her heart danced with delight. This life of enforced widowhood may stretch on for decades. Let this wretched girl endure her fate in due time. It seemed that she had already discerned the recent lack of activity within the household. I feigned ignorance, smiling brightly as I made my way inside amidst the throng. At the banquet table, my father poured his own wine, his countenance growing darker with each cup he consumed, though he refrained from expressing his ire openly. What a waste it is to have a daughter enter the fray, yet receive not a single word of praise from the emperor. Those old geezers flatter me to my face for allying with the Marquis, yet behind my back, they mock me mercilessly. I smiled sweetly as I filled his cup, but he shot me an irritated glance, taking it only to place it heavily back on the table. At that moment, my aunt interjected, "Your uncle's wife has proposed several matches for the Song family. Yet none have come to fruition. It has ultimately hindered this child." The words left her lips, only for her to immediately panic. "Oh dear, the Marquis is here. Why do I bring this up?" I suppressed a chuckle. With her frail disposition, such matters are even more taboo. A young woman of marriageable age shamelessly seeks to climb higher. Which man could tolerate that? Unexpectedly, Chonghua broke his silence with a laugh. "With neither a betrothal nor an agreement, this is but a figment of imagination, hardly a matter of delay." I was momentarily taken aback. Was he speaking in my defense? After my aunt failed to gain any advantage, and my father remained distracted, I departed with Chonghua after lunch. Following this, Jiutao seemed to act on my aunt's instructions, seeking every opportunity to serve Chonghua closely. I chose to turn a blind eye, diligently organizing the estate as accounts. Upon entering the Marquis's residence, I sought a way to live independently, free from my aunt's machinations. I had long grown accustomed to the subtle and overt rivalries among the wives and concubines within the high gates. I understood well that wielding the authority to manage the household was far more practical than clutching a man's heart. Though outsiders might accuse me of coveting wealth, I was determined to marry into the Marquis's family, for there was no match in the capital more suitable than this. My refusal to wed into the Song family was never due to their lack of fortune, but rather my awareness of their subjugation to my aunt and uncle. Even if Song Ruching truly cared for me, how many trials could he withstand in the face of fame and fortune? If I were to marry, I would choose someone whose authority would remain unchallenged, someone beyond the reach of my aunt's influence. Who else, if not the loyal and unambitious Marquis Zhongwu? Being the mistress of a Marquis's household is no easy task. No one has taken the time to teach me, but having witnessed my grandmother and aunt in fierce competition since childhood, I find little difficulty in navigating this realm. My greatest obstacle, however, lies in those old retainers. With each new ruler comes a new set of officials. Though my mother-in-law verbally granted me the authority to manage the household, the staff continued to heed her every command. Just examining the accounts took several days. They either deflected my inquiries or insisted on consulting the old matriarch first, seemingly aware of my reluctance to approach her. By the first day of the new month, it was my turn to pay my respects to my mother-in-law. I instructed Fulling to bring the accounts and summoned the various stewards to await me in the courtyard. After exchanging pleasantries over tea, I invited them inside. My mother-in-law looked up at me with some surprise, her heart racing with alarm. What scheme does she have in mind? I smiled gently. Several accounts require clarification, and I must trouble you, mother, to assist me in this matter. The stewards, having anticipated this, concealed the falsified accounts on their persons. Yet I chose not to inquire about those. Fulling, bring forth the accounts from those several apothecaries. I must ask the stewards if these dozens of pounds of deer antler are indeed meant for the Marquis's meals. My mother-in-law's expression shifted subtly, her gaze sharp as she scrutinized the stewards. But I knew she was signaling them. The stewards immediately grasped her intent. The Marquis's medicinal ingredients are provided according to the physician's prescriptions. We simply fetch them from the pharmacy. The quantity used is determined by the physician and the pharmacy. I am merely a runner. How could I possibly know the intricacies? That was precisely the response I wanted. Since the stewards are unclear on these matters, I must appoint someone who is knowledgeable to handle them in the future, to spare the stewards from unnecessary toil and tears, for their efforts would be in vain. My mother-in-law remained impassive, inquiring if I had a suitable candidate in mind. I suggested he woo from the front courtyard. His family has long been in the medical profession, naturally making him more familiar with these matters than most. My mother-in-law found it difficult to refute, only managing a reluctant acknowledgement, though she cautioned that any mistakes could jeopardize the Marquis's health. He Wu had been in the household for several years. He was taciturn and lacked the art of flattery, but he had been thoroughly dominated by the other stewards. Given this new assignment, he would undoubtedly apply himself diligently, and in a remarkably short time, he sorted the accounts for the medicinal supplies with clarity. I did not shy away from Chonghua, detailing each entry for him. This single item alone saw a substantial loss of silver notes each year. He simply smiled and replied, "Now that you manage the household, it is only fitting that you have the final say." Following this, I gradually replaced several stewards overseeing different accounts in the outer courtyard and changed a significant portion of the inner courtyard servants for various reasons. Finding fault was far too easy. A casual stroll around the courtyard allowed me to overhear many of their hidden schemes. Originally, The servants had relied on the Marquis's favor, and my mother-in-law was a lenient overseer, leading to plenty of opportunities for the servants to line their pockets. If they thrived through such means, why shouldn't I replace them with my own people who would at least heed my commands? News from the general's residence frequently reached me, revealing that my aunt had sent people several times to clandestinely meet with Chiotao, likely dismayed that she had yet to capture the Marquis's attention, and was now contemplating alternative schemes. One day, quite unexpectedly, she managed to find a renowned physician and brought him personally to our doorstep. A flicker of recognition stirred within me as I recalled the face of a young man. With my aunt now heavily pregnant, she walked with her hands resting on her waist, flanked by 3 or 4 maidservants, her demeanor undoubtedly more imposing than before. Upon seeing me, she immediately burst into tears, lamenting how gaunt I had become. I suppressed my revulsion as we exchanged pleasantries. It was absurd. Despite the mental strain of running the household, I was well fed and well cared for, and I had actually gained a bit of weight. She introduced the physician, claiming his skills were extraordinary and might benefit the Marquis. Before I could voice my thoughts, my aunt hurriedly commanded, "Chiotao, take the physician to examine the Marquis." The physician, donned in a new outfit, kept his head bowed. But the moment he entered, I instantly recognized him. My aunt, meanwhile, discreetly stole glances at me. She couldn't possibly recognize him from that fleeting glance, could she? Her suspicion was confirmed as I maintained a serene smile, betraying no hint of my inner turmoil. Gradually, my aunt steadied her nerves, her expression brightening with a hint of amusement. Fulling, however, shot a cold glance at Chiotao as she rushed to leave, her heart simmering with anger. What nonsense is this? Running back and forth to the Marquis's quarters in such flimsy attire. Do they think we are blind? I stifled a laugh, patting her shoulder. The Marquis's medicinal soup is ready. You might as well take it in now, and I shall join you shortly. My aunt's visit was not solely to deliver a physician. She had ulterior motives as well. She discreetly pulled me aside. Your uncle's wife has been quite worried about you. Just the other day, she proposed that if things do not improve, perhaps we could adopt your cousin's illegitimate son. Ah. So she intends to not only arrange for a favored concubine for the Marquis, but also to introduce a child to inherit the Marquis's estate? I wore a composed smile. I appreciate the concern of both my uncle and you, dear aunt, but the matter of adoption is still premature. It would be better to discuss it in a few years. My aunt grew anxious. That child is barely a month old. If you raise him as your own, he will bond with you as if he were truly your flesh and blood. Waiting a few more years may risk losing that connection. I could not suppress the cold laughter bubbling within me. When my aunt married into the family, I was but a mere infant, yet she nurtured me for over a decade only to wish for my demise. Words escaped my lips. The bond between mother and child is also subject to fate. Not everyone is as benevolent as my aunt has been to me. Let us speak of this another time. My aunt forced a smile, her lips curving in a strained manner, while her thoughts chilled me to the core. What do my maternal ties and fate have to do with you? Had it not been for the insufficient poison administered to your mother, this little pest would have long since met her end. She feared that her malice towards my legitimate sister could not be revealed to the world, thus she reminded me of it from time to time. The miraculous physician had worked wonders, and Hichomyue's health was visibly improving. This only served to heighten my aunt's satisfaction. Disregarding my feelings, she visited repeatedly, and the physician came to the estate as if it were his own home. I maintained an impassive facade, deliberately praising my aunt's compassion in front of Chiotao, suggesting that it must be difficult to secure the physician's services. Yet deep within, my desire for vengeance grew more fervent by the day. My mother was a legitimate daughter, who, upon marrying into the general's household, shared a profound love with my father, only to succumb to complications during childbirth. For decades, I had never considered that she might have been the victim of treachery. Perhaps she herself was unaware that her beloved half-sister harbored intentions to bring about her demise. After the physician's arrival for over half a month, one morning, Hichomyue managed to move his leg slightly. Overjoyed, he called out my name, wanting, "Please press on my right leg." Upon doing so, he was ecstatic, exclaiming, "I can feel it, I truly can feel it." My mother-in-law, upon learning of this, hurried over and sent someone to summon the imperial physician. After much commotion, the elderly physician expressed astonishment. This is indeed unexpected. There are signs of the Marquis's meridians becoming unblocked. Unable to contain my curiosity, I stealthily observed Hichomyue, intrigued by the source of his joy. As Hichomyue's recovery progressed, I found myself increasingly troubled. Even he noticed my unease and one day while I was massaging his leg, inquired, "Is there something weighing on your mind, my lady? The outer courtyard? The inner courtyard?" I shook my head, yet he seemed to possess an astute intuition, casually asking, "Does it relate to your mother?" How peculiar. I began to suspect he could hear the thoughts of others just as I could. "How do you know, my lord?" I blurted out in panic, realizing too late the words had escaped my lips. He Chongyue's brows furrowed, as if he sighed, "I spend my days observing you, my lady. Every frown and smile, I meticulously ponder. How could I fail to perceive your concerns?" After much hesitation, I decided there was no one else to confide in. So I recounted the entire story to him, omitting only my earlier actions of placing spies within the general's household. For reasons unknown, I feared he might suspect my motives for marrying into the Marquis's family were ulterior. In the days that followed, He Chongyue and the physician met increasingly often, with Chiu attending to him more diligently. The official families in the capital frequently congregated, and invitations began to arrive for me. Fuling was particularly elated, declaring, "Everyone outside says the lady is a harbinger of good fortune. Ever since she entered the Marquis's household, everything has gone smoothly, and the Marquis's affliction is swiftly improving. No one dares to speak ill of the lady behind her back anymore, and I even heard the general has been invited to the commander's residence for drinks lately." This stirred something within me, recalling what He Chongyue had mentioned before. Although the Empress Dowager and the current emperor are mother and son, their relationship is far from affectionate. It is said that the Empress Dowager initially intended for her second son, the Shun Wang, to ascend the throne. However, the Shun Wang, in his impatience, donned the dragon robe at the prince's residence before the late emperor had even passed, inciting the latter's wrath, who then bequeathed the throne to the current emperor and confined the Shun Wang to the northwestern frontier, forbidding him to enter the capital without a decree. The Shun Wang's consort, the legitimate daughter of the commander, accompanied him to the desolate northwest. While the current emperor is often regarded as benevolent and has not implicated the commander's household, it is rumored that he has become infatuated with elixirs, which, although not affecting the governance, might hint at impending changes in the northwestern region. As I pieced together these connections, I mused that my father might have lost his senses. Why choose to befriend the commander now, after so long? It seemed he intended to gamble with his life. Moreover, my heavily pregnant aunt visited, surprisingly to persuade me to allow the Marquis to take a concubine. With both hands cradling her belly, she slowly sat down, smiling. Initially, I was skeptical about the physician's claims regarding the Marquis's recovery, as it had been a short time. However, Chiu, blushing and shy, mentioned that the Marquis is inclined to take her as a concubine. I thought it quite fortunate. I opened my mouth, struggling to find the words. No wonder Chiu had volunteered to fetch medicine for the Marquis yesterday. It turned out she had gone to the general's household for it. I had specifically sent someone to follow her, yet there was a lapse. After a moment's contemplation, I resolved to play along. Very well. If the Marquis is indeed willing, I shall certainly support this, especially since it concerns someone familiar. I smiled warmly, as if a slumbering person had found a soft pillow to rest upon. In recent days, my mother-in-law had been unwell after visiting the Empress Dowager. She returned and fell ill. Upon hearing of my intention to allow the Marquis to take a concubine, her spirits waned, and she merely waved her hand, suggesting I manage it simply, considering I had been married for less than a year. Conversely, He Chongyue frowned deeply upon my mention of this matter. "My lady, is this truly your intention?" He now could slowly walk to the courtyard, leaning against the window frame and table for support, basking in the sunlight as I broached the topic. I glanced at Chiu, who immediately averted her gaze in panic. "I can now guess your thoughts, my lord. Since you favor Chiu, it would be best to take her into your chambers. I will have someone tidy up the side courtyard tomorrow and grant her the status of a concubine. It will merely require you to occasionally visit the adjacent courtyard." I spoke casually, yet unbeknownst to me, my words carried a hint of jealousy. "Surely, we cannot allow her to reside in the main courtyard. If the Marquis wishes to avoid the whispers of the public." He Chongyue chuckled softly, unable to contain his laughter. "It is rare for my lady to venture a guess at my thoughts, yet you have missed the mark by a wide margin." He glanced at Chiu, his gaze carrying a chill. "When did I ever express a desire to take a concubine?" Chiu's complexion turned pale, and she hurriedly knelt. "My lord, you clearly stated that my beauty surpasses the lady's. How can I be relegated to a lesser status? I ought to at least be a concubine." He Chongyue pointed to the groom standing outside. "I indeed wish to find a suitable match for Chiu, but as she is your dowry maid, I cannot speak freely." You need not hesitate. When my lady boldly married me during my lowest point, defying all odds, I vowed to remain devoted to you for life. However, Chiotao lacks propriety and has spoken frivolously on multiple occasions, causing me considerable distress. Chiotao trembled as she pressed herself to the ground. He Chongyue continued, surely, my lady would not teach her such things, yet if word were to spread, it would invite criticism upon you. Hence, I shall arrange a marriage for Chiotao. Among the many servants in the household, there were certainly those of good standing, yet it seemed He Chongyue deliberately chose to marry her to that coarse groom. Chiotao was so frightened she fainted, and several matrons dragged her away, preparing her for the groom's humble abode that evening. My aunt received the news the following morning, and upon hearing it, she was so enraged that she smashed her dishes, endangering her pregnancy. As for He Chongyue's words, I could not discern their authenticity. I was merely astonished that my aunt's carefully laid scheme was thwarted before it could even unfold. I had arranged for my informants in the general's household to report every hour. My aunt was in labor. Blood flowed in torrents, and it was said she cried out until her voice was hoarse. My father had recently been dispatched by His Majesty to the northern Jiang region to provide aid to the flood victims, transporting carts laden with provisions and clothing. And he had likely only traversed part of the journey. The city was bustling with midwives flitting in and out of the general's residence. They entered with an air of calm confidence, but emerged in a state of utter disarray. I found solace beneath the wisteria trellis in the courtyard, sipping spring tea while my companion, Fulling, animatedly recounted amusing tales. Chiotao knelt before me yesterday, pleading to meet the lady of the house, claiming that due to her years of service at the general's residence, she should be allowed to return and engage in some menial tasks. I chuckled softly. Taking a sip of tea, she is beseeching the wrong person. She ought to implore the lady of the general's house. Once a woman of official lineage, she had been relegated to the status of a servant. Yet she foolishly believed my aunt's words and harbored aspirations of ascending to the lord's bed and claiming the position of the principal wife. Did she think I was oblivious to the schemes she plotted in my presence? As long as the lord's heart remains with me, the general's wife will undoubtedly find a way to see me replaced. What noble ladies can retain a man's heart? How many have met with a favorable end? She even schemed early on about how to eliminate me discreetly, ideally framing Fulling for the deed. You see, she could not even tolerate the maidservants by my side. Such a person is indeed a product of my aunt's meticulous training. The steward of the general's residence, drenched in sweat, was ushered in. Miss, it appears that the lady... I feigned a look of alarm. What are we waiting for? Take the lord's waist token and summon the imperial physician immediately. Observing the steward, caked in mud and limping, I understood that his journey had been particularly arduous. Time dragged on, yet it finally stretched out just enough, rendering my efforts in orchestrating countless obstacles worthwhile. When the imperial physician arrived at the general's residence, it was already too late to salvage the situation. The male infant had suffocated within my aunt's womb, and she was bleeding profusely. It was unlikely she would conceive again, akin to a barren tree blossoming. My aunt fainted from her grief. In the dead of night, the empress urgently summoned the midwife to the palace, and shortly after, dispatched a gray-bearded eunuch to request my presence as well. However, by the time the message reached me, I was already within the confines of the general's residence. I covered my mouth and nose as I approached my aunt's bed, the stench of blood permeating the air, while outside, a throng of trembling maidservants knelt, their sobs echoing. I waited for her to awaken. Just after the second watch of the night, a clamor of clashing weapons erupted from outside. My aunt remained with her eyes tightly shut, yet I could hear her thoughts loud and clear. As long as the general returns, I still have a chance. You have no chance left. When you awaken, open your eyes. I could not suppress a smile, a sense of exhilaration bubbling within me, reaching its zenith when I met her suddenly opened gaze. My aunt's voice was a mere whisper, wanting your brother. I have no such fortune. What brother? Her complexion shifted as she spoke, wanting. Why do you address me in such a tone? Having reached this juncture, I could no longer feign civility. That deceased infant? The physician has just taken blood and compared it to my father's, and they share not a single connection. How can you claim him as my brother? How could this be? She weakly protested, attempting to rise but collapsing back onto the bed in exhaustion. Aunt, did you not use the same method to cause my mother's demise during childbirth? How can you not recognize the familiarity? Her face turned ashen. No, it cannot be. Several arrows whooshed through the paper window, landing on the floor within. I edged closer to the bed. The two maidservants you bribed back then promised to return to freedom after fulfilling their task. And what was the outcome? One perished, and the other was gravely injured. I touched the jade bracelet on my wrist. The severely injured one, her face disfigured. I only managed to locate her a few months ago. This fallen maidservant had taken He Chongyue several months to find, and by the time she was rescued, she was on the brink of death. I had arranged for her to be nourished with medicine for a long time. I needed not utter a word. I had clandestinely placed this maidservant filled with hatred into the general's residence as a menial worker. She then employed the same nurturing methods and the same seeking medical help strategies on my aunt. My aunt coughed up a mouthful of dark blood, and when she looked at me again, her eyes were filled with despair. Keeping you around has indeed been a curse. I should have allowed the Song family to tarnish your virtue from the outset, preventing you from having the backing of the Marquise. Your mother was merely a legitimate daughter. Yet she overshadowed me at every turn, and in the end, what did it amount to? The body's still warm, and the general has taken me as his wife. How long had she been married to the general? I have endured in this residence for over a decade. Even if the general were to learn the truth now, how could he bear to part with me? I could not help but feel a twinge of pity for her intellect, wasted over the years. Surely you do not believe my father, a military general, was truly sent to transport disaster relief supplies? He is comfortably residing in our estate on the outskirts of the capital. If he truly cared for you, would he not have appeared upon learning of your complications? My aunt's eyes widened in shock. The general. What esteemed physician? Merely a wandering sorcerer with whom you have entangled yourself for years. You were so eager to eliminate me because I stumbled upon your illicit affair, were you not? The Lord's affliction is nothing more than a ruse. He was merely seeking an opportunity, and you, in your impatience, delivered it to him on a silver platter. Do you truly believe a mere quack could orchestrate my demise? Those outside believed the Marquis had succumbed to a strange illness, losing the favor of the Emperor. Yet they were oblivious to the fact that this had always been a scheme conjured by the Emperor and the loyal Marquis. Since the day King Shun was imprisoned in the northwestern frontier, the Empress has longed for his return. The youthful and ambitious loyal Marquis was, after all, the Emperor's right-hand man in ascending to the throne, and thus became a thorn in the Empress's side. She had long exploited the discord between the Marquis and his mother, employing her tactics for years, even resorting to poisoning the Marquis. However, she underestimated the loyal Marquis, who had led troops into battle since he was merely a teenager. He saw through her scheme early on and chose to turn the tables, feigning illness for years. As obstacles were cleared away, the Emperor became enamored with elixirs, and the Empress began inciting the generals to win over various military leaders, all to pave the way for King Shun's return to the capital. I glanced outside to see flames illuminating the night sky. It seemed that the secret guards He Chongyue had left for me would not last much longer. I observed as my aunt's breathing became increasingly shallow, her face turning an ominous shade of blue. Yet she persisted in her questioning. When did the general find out? A few days ago, I had someone take that so-called physician to the outer estate. Given your audacity in repeatedly sending people to his door, do you think my father remained oblivious? It was only after my aunt's attempt to poison me that I connected the young man with her unborn child. During my convalescence in the residence, the physician visited numerous times. On one occasion, my father caught a cold, and after examining him, the physician frowned in confusion. I overheard his internal musings. It is indeed perplexing that the general can no longer father a child. Shortly after my mother passed, my father returned from a great battle, gravely injured. It was likely then that he acquired his hidden ailment. It is no wonder my aunt remained barren after so many years of marriage. I mused that my father, presently at the outer estate, would not let that physician escape easily. Yet before I could ponder further, a violent clash erupted, and 2 doors crashed down, a pristine white sword hurtling towards me. There was no escape within the confines of the room. I nearly believed my time had come. Yet in a moment of sheer instinct, the sword was deflected by an incoming force, embedding itself in the intricately carved wardrobe. I opened my eyes to see He Chongyue, clad in battle attire, his cheeks stained with blood, while his sword pierced the neck of the cloaked assailant. "Madam, I have arrived too late." His voice bore a hint of urgency, starkly contrasting the calm demeanor he displayed. In a moment of vulnerability, I relinquished all my defenses and strength, only to be enveloped by the overwhelming stench of blood that rendered me dizzy. As I collapsed sideways, it felt as though I had fallen into a broad chest. When I awoke the following day, the sunlight flooded the room. I lay comfortably on the bed in the Vofu. Beside me was the anxious face of Fuling. Upon noticing my open eyes, she exclaimed in surprise and joy, "Madam is awake. Madam is awake." The door swung open with a heavy thud, Anno Chongyert entered clad in imposing armor, his eyes shadowed but illuminated by evident delight. Has it been accomplished? I could not help but inquire. He simply smiled, his hand resting on my abdomen. Thank you, madam. The outcome of this matter shall only be revealed in 10 months' time. I was momentarily taken aback. While Fu Ling could no longer contain her laughter. I meant the affairs of the palace. Only then did Chongyert adopt a more serious demeanor. Everything has proceeded smoothly. The king was assassinated before he could reach the capital. The Empress Dowager had detained several officials' families, but last night, a sudden flood in the palace caused widespread panic, leading to minimal injuries. However, my thoughts immediately drifted to my mother-in-law. Neither the Empress Dowager nor your mother could be rescued. The expression on her Chongyer's face betrayed no emotion, as if he were discussing an unrelated matter. Reflecting on the chaos that had engulfed the city the previous night, the palace flood seemed unsurprising, further solidifying my belief that the current sovereign was resolute and had undoubtedly prepared for every eventuality. Noticing a flicker of evasion in her Chongyer's gaze, I pressed on, but are there any unforeseen developments? Your father-in-law returned to the manor this morning, sword in hand. It is said that your mother's corpse is in a lamentable state. I could almost envision my father's fury, especially given his unwavering compliance with my aunt over the past years. He Chongyert assured me that he had dispatched individuals to handle the matter discreetly, ensuring that no gossip would circulate. Yet my father-in-law insisted on divorcing my aunt, even in death. Very well, madam. May we now discuss the matter of our child? I had once asked He Chongyert when he began to trust me. After all, it was shortly after my return home that he laid everything bare before me. He paused for a moment, and when he met my gaze again, his expression was imbued with warmth. I heard that the legitimate daughter of the general was weeping and clamoring to marry me, so I patiently awaited your voluntary submission. He recounted how, years ago, during his first triumphant return, he rode through a throng of people welcoming him. A chubby little girl, cradled by her nurse, reached out and grasped his garment. Such a lovely child, wanting wishes to marry him as his bride. He lifted the little girl onto his horse, and to his surprise, she neither cried nor fussed, her hands clutching his cloak as she gazed at him intently. It was only when the general's household sought him out that he realized she was the legitimate daughter of the family. At that time, the sovereign had been toasting with him in the inner hall, and after several rounds of drink, laughingly inquired what reward he desired. Feeling a bit tipsy, he replied, "In a few years, I request that your majesty grant me the hand of General Shen's daughter in marriage." The sovereign jested that this was a more profound victory than defeating General Shen in battle, yet unbeknownst to him, his longing was genuine. The story concludes here. Thank you for listening. I look forward to our next tale.